Faith has moved from California to San Cristobal de las Casas in Mexico with her mother, Bernice, and stepfather, Hector. Being in a new school and learning Spanish is hard, and Faith turns to her dog Eddie for comfort. Eddie is a perro corriente, which in Spanish means the same as mutt. Eddie, who understands Spanish, English, and other languages, tells this story. Fetch. In the morning I was awakened by an aroma wafting from the kitchen and decided to investigate. Milagros was there cooking eggs. Milagros is dark and broad, and always wears traditional brilliant blue blouses, which she had embroidered herself. On the shoulder of this blouse she'd sewn her name and surrounded it with bright yellow and pink flowers. She sang in tzotzil while she worked. I could smell chiles, cilantro, onions, garlic, and fresh corn tortillas. I whined. Ay, perrito, Milagros said. She looked down at me, and I could see pity in her eyes. She had an open, friendly face. Though she was only a teenager, she looked very grown up. Mi Chavinagi? She asked. I nodded and gave her my beggar face. I have charming amber-colored eyes, which, combined with my crisp brow, a common electric dog trait, make for an irresistible sight. I moistened my eyes and sucked in my gut. I was completely pitiable. She looked to the left and to the right, as Faith had done the night before, and when she decided the coast was clear, she opened the refrigerator and withdrew a platter of the leftover carnitas. Shh, she said. I stopped panting. She gingerly plucked a particularly gooey chunk of pork from the plate and offered it to me. I seized it. I swallowed it. I sighed. Dare I whine for more? I wondered. I dared. Shh, she hissed, looking around, without taking her eyes off the kitchen door. She snatched another piece of pork and flipped it into the air. I arced high over my head. I leaped and caught it with a stunning mid-flight torso twist and once again dispensed with it hastily. There were indeed perks to this new lifestyle. Muyuksha, she said, replacing the platter and closing the refrigerator door. Bernice came in minutes later and escorted me out into the courtyard, saying, No dogs in the kitchen, understand? Little did she know, dear reader, that I did understand. After the family had eaten breakfast, Bernice and Hector each got ready for work. As Bernice had to leave earlier, it was left to Hector to get Faith off to school. Plainly, she did not wish to go to school. I hate it, she answered when Hector asked why she didn't want to go. Eventually, he got her into the car despite her kicking and screaming, and off they went. Milagros got started on her housework, the dishes, the beds, the mopping, the laundry. And I got down to dog's work, marking my territory, napping, digging up the flower beds, gnawing, napping. That afternoon, Faith rushed through the door, her eyes all red and swollen. She sank to her knees and hugged me and sobbed. Oh, Eddie, she said, I hate it. I just hate it. She pressed my muzzle up into her face and licked her cheek. It tasted salty. The kids at school hate me, she said. The teacher hates me. I can't understand a thing anyone says, and they can't understand me either, she sniffled. Diego keeps making fishy faces at me. At that she buried her face into my neck and cried. After a few minutes she pulled away and tried to speak, but only big spit bubbles came out of her mouth. Horrid slimy goo oozed out of her nose. She wiped it all away with a swipe of her sleeve. Would you like to learn a new game? She asked, snuffling. The game was called Fetch. She threw a stick, and I retrieved it. Quite simple, really. I caught him very quickly. Soon I was catching the stick in midair. We played until Faith was called in to dinner, and then, after she'd eaten, I tugged her back outside. We played until it got too dark to see. All that night I lay awake thinking of fetching. The next day, when Faith came through the door after school, I greeted her, stick in mouth. Again, we played until dark, pausing only for dinner. I was obsessed, dogged, Retrieval was all I could think about. I got so that we played fetch every afternoon and always on into the night. I was manic. I would wait for hours by the door with a stick in my mouth, drooling in anticipation. Faith was a real trooper. She rarely denied me a toss. She'd stay up until she was fainting from fatigue, but still she threw. When finally we could go on no more, I would whine and whimper and paw. I slept with a stick in my mouth, just in case she should wake up and wish to play. I began having nightmares too. In one, Faith threw a stick high into the air and waited for it to come down, but it never did. I just stood, poised and intent, staring skyward, waiting. I awoke in a sweat. In another, I chased down a thrown stick, and just as I bent to scoop it, it moved. Again, I lunged at it. But again, it danced out of reach. It began to taunt me, to tease me. Yes, it spoke. I chased it, but I never caught it, never retrieved. Then, one day, as if from a dream, I saw fetch for what it truly is, a monotonous, pointless waste of time. I remember laughing at how positively nutty I've been. Then she taught me tug of war. Faith lost. Some afternoons, Faith's Spanish tutor, Socorro, everyone called her Coco, would come to the house to help Faith with her Spanish. Faith liked Coco. She liked her bright smile and glittering assortment of jewelry. Woven bracelets, chain anklets, school brooches, amber earrings. Faith liked one particular necklace very much. It was a small, shallow silver box that had several long, thin pieces of silver dangling from the bottom. The front of the box was hinged and had a clasp that you could open and close, if you had thumbs. Faith loved to open and close Coco's little silver box so much that Coco began wearing that particular necklace every time she came to visit, and she always put a little surprise inside for Faith. There was only one thing about Coco that Faith didn't like, and that was that she kept trying to teach Faith Spanish. "It's a physical impossibility," Faith would say, but Coco kept trying. Each time she came, she had a surprise in her necklace and a new plan of attack. Coco didn't teach Spanish with a textbook and a chalkboard and worksheets. No, nothing like that. She played games with Faith. Card games, board games, running games, pretending games. She was very clever. One day, she pretended to be Bernice and Faith pretended to be Hector, and they pretended to have an argument. They talked about love and money, grown-up stuff. The catch was that Coco spoke almost entirely in Spanish and that Faith barely seemed to notice. On another day, Faith was a vendor in the mercado and Coco was a hungry customer with very little money. They both really hammed it up without realizing it. Faith began speaking in Spanish. "3 pesos por cada papaya," Coco said. Faith tried to look stern, but ended up giggling and saying, "Sí." Once, Coco helped Faith make what Coco called a family tree. Faith drew pictures of herself, her mother, Hector, Milagros, and me on colored paper. When she cut the pictures out and glued them onto another piece of larger, stiffer paper and wrote the names of each of us under his or her picture, it was the first time I'd ever seen Edison spelled out, and I felt a little proud. It's a handsome word, very tall and straight on one end and very short and curved on the other. Then Coco wrote a word under Bernice. "Madre," she read as she'd finished. She wrote another word under Hector. "Padrastro," she said. Beneath Milagros, she wrote and said, "Amiga." Below my handsome name, she wrote the words I'd so often heard before, "Perro corriente." And under Faith, she wrote a short little word. "Yo," Faith read. "I know yo means I, but how do I say Faith in Spanish?" "¿Cómo?" Coco asked, smiling. "In Spanish?" Faith asked with a heavy sigh. "Sí, en español," Coco said. Faith cleared her throat and said, "¿Cómo se dice Faith en español?" "Bravo!" Coco said, clapping her hands. "Perfecto!" "Gracias!" Faith said, blushing. You can say Faith, Coco said, in English or in Spanish. It's the same. Faith seemed disappointed by this, and I think Coco sensed it. You can also say fe, she told Faith. Fe is Spanish for faith, like when you believe in something. Faith smiled. Fe, she said. Swell. It was on one of the afternoons that Coco came by that the roof fell in. Bernice had gone to pick up Faith from school, and Coco had been waiting a long time for them to return. She kept checking her watch and walking up and down. Milagros assured her in Spanish that they'd be home any minute. But on and on we waited. Finally, Coco said she had to leave. She gave Milagros a hug and said, No te preocupes, mija. Then she got her coat, rubbed my head, and left. The sun was nearly down, and I just couldn't sit and wait any longer. I barked and howled by the front gate until Milagros finally opened it, and then out into the streets of San Cristobal de las Casas I ran, back out into those familiar and friendly streets to find the one who had rescued me from them. Electric shoes. I raced through the narrow cobblestone paths of El Cerrillo, through the feet of the tourists shopping for handicrafts in the Plaza of Santo Domingo, past the cathedral and the Zócalo and the little hill, El Cerrito, in the center of town with the little church on top. The sky was darkening and the air was chilling, and my heart was pounding. Old street dog chums called out as I passed, but I did not acknowledge them. I had far to go and no time to lose. I crossed streets without looking. I passed food scraps without slowing. I was ignoring instincts I'd spent my whole life developing. All I could think about was finding Faith. Nothing else mattered. When I finally crossed the small bridge and spanned the stream around Faith's school, I found Bernice's funny little red car in the parking lot. Parked next to it was a police car with flashing red and white lights. I hurried up the path to the school, which was a cluster of round adobe huts. The lights were on in one of them. I saw Bernice through the window talking to several other people, including a police officer. She looked quite beside herself, and I was waving her arms around as if she was some great bird. I sized up the situation quickly. Faith was missing. I put my nose to work, and within a few minutes I was able to pick up my master's scent. It led me down a path out behind the school and through the trees. The sun had set completely now. There were no lights except the stars above. I was at mercy of my snout. Her scent led me past the spot by the stream where I'd first seen her. I forded the stream and picked up her scent up again on the other side. Brave girl, brave! Foolish and probably soaking wet Faith. I crossed the pasture where horses stood sleeping and in the darkness. Trod in there dropping several times. I got snagged in thistle bushes. I got caught on barbed wire, but I did not lose Faith's scent. It led me into the Panteon. I slipped through a hole in the fence and followed my nose past wooden crosses decorated with plastic flowers. These were the grave markings of the people of San Cristobal de las Casas who had died with little or no money. I climbed the hill toward the more spectacular mausoleums and shrines, in which were laid the city's richer dead folk. Many of the sites were still decorated from the days of the dead. On those days, the first 2 days of November, the people of Mexico visit graves of their dear departed and stay throughout the night. They bring with them the favorite foods and belongings of their loved ones to lure them from the beyond. They decorate the graves with candles and bouquets of bright orange marigolds. They sing the dead's favorite songs, and the children wear masks and play with toy skeletons and eat candied skulls. The cemetery is filled with light and songs and laughter. It's a party for the dead. You see, in Mexico, the dead are not feared. They are welcomed, and graveyards are lively places. But I knew Faith was not from Mexico, and I'd heard that to North American cemeteries are spooky places, so I speeded up my search. I tracked her scent all around the Panteon until I found I was covering the same ground, going around in circles. Obviously, she'd gotten lost. On the outside chance that she was nearby, I howled. I heard back only my echo. fog settled in, wrapping the dimly lit Panteon in an eerie cloak of mist. The air temperature dropped. I felt the dampness in my bones. I wondered if Fate had worn her jacket. I howled again, just my echo. I continued the search. Round and round the gravestones I went. It seemed useless. But what else could I do? I traced and retraced my steps. Finally, exhausted, I crawled up into a tall sky-blue crypt to think. The hill that the Panteon sits atop lies between the school and town. From my vantage point, I looked down on the city nestled in the valley below, all lit up with street lights and the headlights of cars. The sun had set and a crescent moon glimmered behind the wispy fog. I could hear roosters crowing and dogs howling, and so, once again, I howled. I howled from deep down inside of me, from my belly. When you're blue, there's nothing quite like howling at the moon. I don't know how long I'd been howling when I noticed a tiny red flash of light below. Down in the cow pastures and separate the Panteon from town, then I saw another one. Each of the flashes lasted less than a second. After the second, there was a third, then a fourth. There was a rhythm to their appearance. After a moment or two, I remember deciding that there were just two lights and that they were taking turns flashing. They were alternating 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. It wasn't an automobile's tail lights. They wouldn't alternate. They would glow together. It looked to me as if these tiny red lights were walking. And that's when I remember Fate's zapatos eléctricos, her electric shoes, the ones that blinked red with each and every step. They were, and still are, commonly worn by children from the United States. I jumped from the crypt and darted as quickly as I could down the hill, through the gates of the Panteon and along the dirt road toward town and Fate's blinking feet. When I was within earshot, I began to bark. The red lights went out and I lost where she was. I guessed that she had stopped. I continued running in the same direction I'd been and just hoped I'd bump into her. And then the red lights began blinking again, only much more rapidly than they had before. She was running away. I barked louder, but the lights only blinked faster. "Go away!" Faith yelled. "Go away, devil dog! Afuera! Afuera!" I found, to my relief, that I ran much faster than Faith and was able to gain on her fairly easily. I ran past her and headed her off. She skidded to a stop and stood heaving and sobbing and shaking. She was soaking wet and she didn't have her jacket on. Eddie?" she said. I barked. She rushed to me and I jumped up and licked her salty face. "Oh, Eddie," she said, giggling. Good boy. Good boy."